But it's not really enough simply to talk about the functioning of democracy in a strictly electoral sense. We rejoice that on the whole, elections throughout the region have been free and fair, but we all know that that is not enough. That is not what creates a liberal democracy. It's the fabric of life within the country. It's the way society evolves. It's the transmission belts between the population and the political system that really create a liberal and not just an electoral democracy. And that is where the role of civil society comes in. I'm proud to say that this is something which the two organizations that I've been associated with most over recent years and decades have recognized this from the beginning. The European Commission has been a strong supporter of civil society throughout the accession process. During the fifth enlargement, in many of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe after the communist period, civil society was virtually extinguished. Some even said that the EU came in to some degree in Central Europe as a substitute for civil society, at least as a way of building up those institutions that had been crushed during the communist period. And during the present phase, the Commission, DG Enlargement, through the civil society facility that has been set up with its different branches, also recognizes the crucial support of civil society. The German Marshall Fund has been extremely active in this area, mainly under the leadership of Ivan Voivoda and colleagues in supporting civil society, notably through the Balkan Trust for Democracy. And for me, it's an interesting experience comparing the work that I was doing in the Commission with several colleagues who are here today and the work of the Balkan Trust for Democracy. I think to some extent this is proof, if proof were needed, of the adage, small is beautiful. Because when I see the turnaround time for projects, for example, which are submitted to the Balkan Trust for Democracy, and I compare that with the turnaround time needed in the case of the Commission, it's really impressive. And the projects range in size enormously. There are some projects which are really almost micro projects down to 2,000 euros, something which the Commission with its heavy machinery really couldn't cope with, because the administrative cost, for a project of 2,000 euros is perhaps just the same as it would be for 50,000 or 100,000 or more. And that's something which is difficult for the Commission to do, but it's something which the Balkan Trust for Democracy has been able to do. And I think another strength, apart from the quick turnaround time, is the proximity to the beneficiaries by the work on the spot. And I think the team in Belgrade, which I understand now are 7 or 8 people, really are very close to the NGOs who are working with civil society and understand very well the issues involved and are not so bound by constraints as their counterparts.
Well, for the European Commission, I mean, I could be vicious and say, well, coordinating donors is a good start, right? I actually think there are a couple of coordinating mechanisms where donors are already coordinating. I think for a start, EC could join the Grantmakers East Forum and attend the meetings where most of the private...
They've been invited.
They've been invited every year. We hear they will come next year. But what I'm trying to say is coordinating donors is insufficient. The expectations from European Commission are much, much greater. And the expectations center around European Commission funding being the catalyst for the change that we need to happen in the region in terms of supporting civil society. And whether that's done through funding going through the government or through national foundations or through regional foundations is less important. I think it should go through national foundations, but that's just me. It's less important. What's more important is what strategic goal of it is. And I think European Commission with its size, budgets, importance, political influence it has the power to actually move things in the direction of civil society and the government's engagement, proper engagement mechanisms and consultation mechanisms, promoting the philanthropy, promoting the individual giving, helping us set the legislative frameworks in which things will be regulated that encourage giving, that encourage private companies, and so on and so on. I think I'm stop.
One is that capacity does exist. Human resource capacity, idea capacity does exist. There is no reason any longer that I can imagine that we would want to support a European or American registered organization to provide technical assistance to any of the countries in the Balkans.
To move from an ad hoc project-based approach to programming, which had been applied in the FAR and CARDS phase, and also when we began with the new EPA in 2007. So it was identified that a sector approach could really bring better value for money, be more effective and efficient. It would strengthen ownership in the beneficiary countries. It would, if the beneficiary countries really had control over donors, we could work towards better and more specific, well-defined results and have more impact on the ground. So between then and now, we've had a number of workshops, training on the sector approach for the beneficiaries, for headquarters staff and for the delegations. We have drafted, and they've now been approved, multi-annual indicative planning documents.
With the EU remaining the key stakeholder, the key donor, our role as a government was to make sure that we kind of clean up in our own courtyard, to make sure that we are coordinated among ourselves, that key national agencies and bodies know very well what are doing in terms of priorities and not overlapping among each other. So what we've done, we have made extensive efforts in local donor, public donor coordination, public agencies, made sure that everybody knows who is doing what, and then we try to make sure that we are tuned into the EU programming and priorities as much as possible, to make sure that whatever is EU doing in the country is complementary to what major public donors in Croatia are doing.
Of democratic development, it was, I think, great period for watchdog NGOs at that period of time pre-accession. It's not the case now. And why? Because we had a strong European Commission delegation in Romania. Now, as a member of European Economic and Social Committee, I'm traveling in the Balkans. They are very weak. They don't have strong personalities, strong people dealing with NGOs. In Romania, it was a strong team working on civil society area, and they were amazing. In the morning, the representative of GMF was working with us, Michael Lee. He was saying in some of the countries we were civil society. This was the one of the criticisms we get, that we are civil society. In Romania it was a mix. I recognize that it was a very important role of European Commission delegation that backed all the time our requests.
EU is the most influential, both in terms of the volume of assistance disbursed to civil society in the region, as well as in the funding, in the repertoire of issues and themes that it is supporting. But I think what was raised here in the debate is it, and the question, the dilemma, is it successful in driving the agenda, in not driving the agenda maybe, but in synergizing with the other donors, local stakeholders, national government effort in the area that we're talking, which is civil society development, and in a way it is using the support, the types of activities and the methodology, the bottom line of the core funding, which is the pain of the civil society, and the granting, how to reach to the grassroots. So we have definitely factually confirmed that the EU is the most influential in that sense, and what we are raising now the issue, how is the EU living up to that influence that it is possibly to exert in terms of the funding support and also the policy leverage that it can exert, especially on the national governments concerning civil society development. And we have heard also a lot about that experience in this last panel. Secondly, I think arousing for the audience reaction, I could see that the experience that were brought in from the new member states, the presentation from Bulgaria and also the presentation from a Romanian experience, is very illustrative. It's not maybe positive in that respect, but it is like kind of a warning and a reminder for what we should do right in our region, in this sixth enlargement, if we can call it like that, is basically two things. Is what I think was clear in the presentation is that the EU reform agenda is not always effective. It might be, but not always effective conduit for completing the key structural reforms. And we have seen that concretely in the presentation of Asia. For example, in the health reform that she illustrated. So sometimes, and what we expect is that, you know, the transition or the structural reforms that need to take place in our country would run in parallel, all be supportive, and the EU reform process should support it. But what we have actually seen that this was not so successfully done generally, but it depends on the country now, but still in the Central East Europe in the previous enlargement. And this is a lesson learned that we should take for our region.